herzlich willkommen zum nächsten Panel hier auf der Hauptbühne. Und wir möchten in den nächsten 45 Minuten Deutschland gedanklich ein bisschen verlassen und uns mal anschauen, was eigentlich so in anderen europäischen Ländern los ist. Und ganz konkret gucken wir tatsächlich auf die Insel, also nach Irland und Großbritannien. Ja, und da freue ich mich schon sehr auf die Diskussion. Mein Name ist Julia Meuter. Ich glaube, vielleicht habt ihr mich schon eben auch auf der Bühne gesehen. Ich leite den openTransfer Accelerator hier bei der Stiftung Bürgermut. Und ich werde jetzt durch die nächsten 45 Minuten moderieren. Wir haben drei großartige Speakerinnen da, die leider ja, nicht Deutsch sprechen oder zumindest nicht so gut Deutsch sprechen, dass wir diese Diskussion auf Deutsch führen könnten. Deswegen wird diese Diskussion, wie wir es auch schon angekündigt haben, im Programm auf Englisch stattfinden. And this is my cue to switch into English. And yes, I would like to extend the warm welcome to our speakers who are now joining us via Zoom. And a huge thank you that you took your time and we made it with the time difference. I'm so happy that you're here. I would start off with just saying a little bit about you, who you are, and then we would just go into the questions. And for the participants, as always, if you have any questions, I have the iPad here so I can see it and just ask them away, and then I can extend it. So we have with us Madeleine Clark, who is the founding director of Genio in Ireland, which is an NGO that works with philanthropy and government at national and EU levels. I hope, by the way, I pronounced everything correct. I apologize in advance to you three if I make any mistakes. And so you support social services to solve complex problems and scale social innovation. So here we have scale already. And you do this by helping to bring stakeholders together and navigate the pathway through the challenges of system reform. And to help implement and scale more personalized, community-based and cost-effective social services. Thank you so much for being with us. Then we have Hannah Barker with us. She is the head of programs for Spring Impact, an organization based in the UK, US and Australia, helping ambitious teams with the skills, tools and mindset needed on their journey to achieve social impact at scale. Sounds familiar, Hannah? So it's very similar to what we do with the Accelerator, and we talked a lot already, so I'm super, super excited that you're here and sharing your knowledge and your experiences with the participants. And last but not least, we have Mazina Farhana Sherlock with us. She is actually from an organization that is in the program of Spring Impact, called Social Bite, and you are a Scottish organization helping homeless people and campaigning for their issue. And as I said, you are in the program of Spring Impact with a project or a program that you also oversee called Jobs First. We will hear about all of you and all your projects and your programs a little bit later, but I would actually would like to start off with the question to both Hannah and Madeleine. So maybe you could just, to kind of set the scene for our viewers, kind of tell us a little bit about how is it in your countries, like in Ireland and in the UK respectively, like is scaling up an issue? I know that it's your expertise, but our non-profit organizations think about scaling up. Are foundations or social impact organizations like helping and supporting social innovations to scale up? Or are you just a unicorn in your country? Maybe Hannah, you would like to start. How is it in the UK?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Really good to be here, and thanks for inviting me. So I think lots of organizations want to scale up in the UK. I think that there's kind of a phase where an organization is starting up, a phase where they're establishing, And then once they've established, a large number of organizations then think they need to have a next step that needs to be scale. I think something that's really common is that organizations see scale as being the same as growing their own organization. So that next step is often like, how do I build my team, get more staff on board, reach other locations? I think something that there's fewer organizations thinking about and doing is thinking like, how do I have more impact without necessarily growing my own organization? And at Spring Impact, that's how we help people to think about scale. So how can they work with partners, share their lessons, basically have more impact without necessarily becoming a kind of huge national organization. I think that's something that's still relatively rare as a way of thinking amongst nonprofits, but also amongst funders as well. I also think there's lots of funders and nonprofits that really like the idea of scale, and there are some that like it less, and I think see organizations scaling as being at odds, in tension, I guess, with kind of more place-based approaches and grassroots movements. So I think there's some kind of discussion there to be had in the UK as well.
Thank you, so interesting. And Madeleine, how is it in Ireland?
Hello, everybody, and thank you for the invitation to join this panel over what is lunchtime here in Ireland. Good way to spend lunch. Hannah, I'm delighted you kicked off with this point about not necessarily thinking of impact as necessarily growing organisations. I think it's a critical point. So in Ireland, yes, I mean, you know, most people who are in the social innovation or who see themselves as social entrepreneurs are very excited about their own ideas and can often put these across in very compelling ways. And for sure, the main way they see, they think about scaling is making their organizations bigger or, you know, developing branches or all of that. And yes, that's one way to scale, but as you say, Hannah, not the only way. So interesting, in Ireland at the moment, scaling is becoming a little bit more of a popular topic because we are in a consortium to develop a national competence centre on social innovation. And Genio, the organisation that I lead with another organisation here, Rethink Ireland, are leading this development with lots of good organisations in the ecosystem, if you say it like this. And one of the contributions that we've been trying to make is that exact point that you know, scaling can happen in well, we would see it about three different ways. You know, one and one of those could be growing organisations. But the expectation of the Commission is that each consortium, and the consortium in our case, it has 4 countries in it. So there are 25 countries across the European Union that are involved in consortia, and each one trying to develop a national competence centre on social innovation. And we're trying to look at scaling as a really key topic, because the European Social Fund plus money for social innovation is very much focused on scaling. So it's, I would say, people like it and they talk about it. They talk about it in quite a narrow sense at the moment, but we are beginning to open up to thinking about it in more, as you have put it well there, Hannah, scaling impact as opposed to necessarily scaling organizations. So kind of a wider lens on this. But we're still, you know, scaling good solutions is still quite a challenge.
Thank you so much for that insight already in your 2 respective countries, and also, Madeleine, into the wider European Union a little bit. We will come back to you later, but I would like to start, or I would like to stay with Hannah a little bit, because you already said that you know, you're trying to help organizations to kind of think a little bit different about scaling, and not just you know, growing the organization. And so you do that with your organization Spring Impact and your Accelerator program. Maybe you could start off to tell us a little bit more about what you actually do in that program. How do you help organizations?
Yeah, sure, happy to. So I think we work with organizations who are already thinking a little bit differently about how they want to scale their impact. So they're organizations that are really ambitious about kind of the change that they want to make in the world and really solving the problem that they see, rather than necessarily being wedded to an idea of kind of organizational growth. And they tend to be organizations that kind of, are ambitious, as I say, but maybe don't have kind of like the tools, like often like the confidence, often it is, kind of the skills sometimes to build a really like deliberate strategy for scaling. So the way that we support them is we kind of do consultancy on the one hand, and part of our Scale Accelerator program is kind of consultancy over a 6-month period or maybe longer, with organizations like Social Bite, which Meuter is here from. And we also run training programs as well to help organizations think kind of strategically about scale. And quite hard to describe like what it feels like on that program. Maybe Meuter can shed more light on that. But I guess we help organizations think about questions like whether they can scale impact through partnering, how they do that, like how they work with partners, how they get ready as an organization for scale, how they know whether it's the right thing for them, how quickly they go, finances, like how they're gonna make scaling sustainable. So a whole range of questions like that, so that hopefully once they kind of finish working with us, they have like a clear strategy and plan and roadmap for how they go about kind of scaling what they're doing. And I should say we work like internationally. The Scale Accelerator program itself is just focused on the UK, but we also kind of support organizations from across the world really who have solutions that are really working, that they think this would be really good to share learnings on the solution.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah, as you said, we have one of your organizations with us, and we're going to hear of them in a little bit. But I would like to ask another question just after this. Like on your website, you say we equip ambitious teams with the skills, tools, and mindset needed on their journey to achieve social impact at scale. I find these 3 things really interesting that you mentioned this, and I just wanted to know. So, what do you think is most needed for an organization to scale? Is it really the skills? Is it the tools? Or is it the mindset? Or is it maybe something completely different?
I mean, unhelpfully, I think it's all those things plus like loads of others. So I think the mindset is really important. And when we started up 10 years ago, we would often help organizations with like skills and frameworks and things. But like over the years, we've realized actually the mindset of how you're thinking about scale is super important. I think like even within the social sector, the kind of culture is that organizations tend to think about themselves and how to like prove their own value. So the mindset of like, how do we let go? How do we take risks of like potential damages to our brand? Like, how do we give other people the kind of the stage, as it were? I think that's super important. But yeah, I think there are lots of skills needed as well, like kind of building buy-in from across the whole organization, building relationships, like being really strategic rather than always opportunistic, all those sorts of things. And then I think there are loads of contextual factors as well. So like whether the issue is one that funders are interested in the moment, like where the solution is at and how tested it's been, all of those types of things as well, I think have to be in place. Mm-hmm. So essentially, I think there are lots and lots of different things that have to come together to make a scaling journey successful. But we've definitely seen it happen with lots of organizations that we've worked with, that those those pieces have come together.
Thank you. Yes, organizations you worked with, it's a good cue for getting our third guest into the discussion. I hope I pronounced your name correct. It's Mazina from Social Byte in Scotland. You are one of the, I think, current organizations that are supported by Spring Impact. Maybe we can just start off that you tell us a little bit about that program, Job First, that you are, in with the that you're supported with by Spring Impact, and also maybe your plans to scale up that project. Where do you stand now, and what's the plan?
Hi there, good afternoon. So I'm Mazina, and thanks a lot for the invitation. I will be happy to share about the program. I will just give a very brief overview of what Social Byte does and how did it start, because then it will smoothly bring us to the Jobs First program. It's a social enterprise that was co-founded by Josh Littlejohn in 2012 in Scotland. And initially, it was a chain of coffee shops that, because staff members were approached by somebody affected by homelessness called Pete, who asked for a job, and the job was offered to him. This is how the program started growing. So very grassroots approach. A person affected by homelessness asks about the employment within the Social Byte, and this is how our internal employment program was raised. Through the activities that we do, we also deliver over 140 items of food, again, using food as a tool of engagement, providing volunteering opportunities that lead again to jobs opportunities. And again, we do it because we believe in offering people real opportunities to change. And this is how Jobs First program was born, because we saw success of our internal employment program, where people were supported into not only to gain job within Social Byte, but wrap-around support was provided to them. And Jobs First, I guess it's different from the traditional employability programs because it's based on trust, which means that every person who's being employed received support from support worker. That support is led by an individual, and it includes not only the day-to-day training on the job, but it also includes supports around the barriers that people may face when they are in employment, but when they've been affected by the homelessness and trauma that comes within it. So very often people will receive emotional support, they will gain some training, and just general mental health support if needed. So it is very tailored. We've started working with Spring Impact last year, and there was a consultancy delivered that basically, as Hannah mentioned, helped us to think about scaling, but also there were challenging questions asked that very often led to us changing the way how we think about the program. And currently we've started the pilot already. It started in October, and we aim to employ 60 people over the next 3 years. But to do it, it won't be internally. We will work with external partners who will provide the employment. We will be providing the support opportunities. And then we also work with charity organizations that we hope will be working with us on referral program. And currently we already have got 6 people in employment with 3 major employers. And we're hoping that we will be scaling up over the next 3 years. So now we're in the pilot phase of the program.
Your challenges, you said, they're giving you challenging questions. But so in your pilot, did you have challenges that you counted when scaling up? Maybe also it's something that our viewers might face, even though it's maybe in a different country. And if you already can tell, how did you overcome it?
So when we started working with Scale Accelerator, we had very clear vision how we would like the program to run. We had very clear vision around the support that should be offered to employees, so people who have been affected by homelessness. And we had very clear expectations towards employers, what they would have to provide in order to participate in the program. And I guess through working with Scale Accelerator, we managed to gain a little bit more flexibility in the way how we approach. We really thought about what informations the employers need to have so they can sign up to the program. We've been thinking about the training that we would deliver to employers who again will be offering employment. And as I've mentioned, the pilot started in October this year. We've got already 3 major UK employers on board. And what we've came up with is a 15 months employment program that during the 15 months, an employee will be receiving intensive support. And because we've started working with three employers, we became quite flexible in terms of partnership working agreements, and we provided different training to people. And I think that presented one of the challenges, because after launching the program, we've already had a request from quite a number of new employers, which means that made us think about how flexible can we be? Can we provide bespoke training to every single employer? Will it be realistic? How do we take care of those relationships? So again, we're working through certain things with Scale Accelerator, and we're working now on partnership agreements that can be standardized. And basically, within then every employer, we will look at possibilities of being flexible. And I guess the other challenge that came up within the last few months was working with charity organizations. We were wondering how clear the aims of the program are. Is it understood? How clear are the criteria? And again, in the past, we would probably think about having a perfect program established. And at the moment, we've changed a wee bit. And again, we've learned to do lean testing. And this probably helped us to overcome a challenge of not knowing how well the program is understood by charity organizations, because we've already received feedback that it's fine, but that was possible to do the lean testing that we've learned through the consultancy.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's like challenges that we know from our organizations as well. It's super interesting to hear it from you. Madeleine, I would like to turn to you now. We already heard from you, but you know, from the situation in Ireland. But why don't you start off with telling a little bit about your organization, Genio, to our viewers? What do you do, and how do you support organizations in scaling?
Okay, well, actually, interestingly, our work doesn't really start with the focus on an organization or organizations. Our starting point is actually the innovation. And we have done many things since we established in 2008, but since about 2015, we've been really focusing on identifying innovations that are already proven, that already have evidence behind them. So programs that really stand up and work, and then helping, you know, our real interest is in helping make positive change for as many people as possible. So we work quite closely with government in Ireland as well as philanthropy. And we do 3 things. We manage funding. So we manage state funding as well as philanthropic funding. And we use that as a support to help to refocus large public budgets in a more cost-effective direction. So we're trying to help really with these complex problems like homelessness and mental health, employment and addiction and migration and lots of things like that. But we're really trying to help them to adopt innovations that already have evidence behind them. And that might be that they would in turn then fund NGOs or charities or other organizations, or indeed fund some of their own services to transition. And then we also build capacity. So a little bit like Hannah's organization, we've been working to really help people develop both the mindset, the confidence, and then the skills to manage change. And we do that on a systemic basis. So at this point, we're in 3 national programs that are gaining traction at the national level to adopt innovations that are already established. And we also work in Europe. Again, we're managing some funding there, which involves some commission funding. And then we in Genio, along with the Bosch Foundation and the King Godwin Foundation, have put some money together to see could we identify and support proven innovations. Again, that's our point of entry, if you like, that could plan to scale. So at this point, we're really supporting them, and they have developed some plans to scale. And we do national or pan-European calls, so we're looking very widely to try and identify innovations that can scale.
Thank you so much. And it's a good point that you already mentioned that pan-European initiative. It's the European Social Catalyst Fund, right? Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about it. I think it's quite interesting that also we have a German foundation, Robert Bosch Stiftung, and King Baudouin, I think it's from Belgium, which is quite nice. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about that fund and what you do with this. You already said a little bit, but where are you at? I think you already had one funding round, and maybe we can already add another question. Like, I think we had a call a couple of weeks ago, and I think you mentioned that you are at the moment in the second funding round. So if somebody out there is listening to this, either whether it's an organization and they think, oh my God, this is so interesting, I really want to scale to another European country, or maybe it's a foundation who says, this is super interesting, how can people actually get involved? Or is it just the 3 foundations for the moment?
Sure. Well, just briefly, this fund was really designed on the basis of our collective experience about what happens when something is going to scale. So, if you think about it, you wouldn't put up a building without having a plan. And if you're going to scale an innovation that has been successful in one location, you definitely need a plan. And this is your stock and trade, Hannah, I think, is helping people to do this. So what we have done in the past is we've given planning grants so that people can actually develop a really robust plan and talk to all the partners and get buy-in and do all of the things that are required before something is going to scale. We also, in Genio in particular, we have a big commitment to the end beneficiary or the end user. So a lot of the planning, the reason for us to support people to plan how to scale their innovation is so that they can consult with end beneficiaries and that they can really involve them in a central way in the design of the innovation and how it will scale, because they're the people for whom all of this effort is being made. So it was based on that, and we thought we needed to test some assumptions. Our assumptions were there are really good solutions out there to big, complex social problems. We've invested a lot across Europe, and I've seen quite a lot of good solutions. But really, if we don't invest in helping them to scale and solve some of the problems that seem to be getting bigger rather than smaller, we have a big question to ask. So first of all, finding the innovations that have proven to be successful, at least in one location, and then also helping them to develop their plans to scale. So all that is involved in that. I won't go into detail here and that within the time we have. But the stage we're at, you ask, we are just coming to the end of the first phase. So we opened a call in January 20, and we had 120 applications from 22 countries. So really great response to this. It combines our philanthropic funding with the three contributors there, but also some commission funding. So it's a good example of philanthropy and commission coming together. Out of those, we selected only seven, which was a really hard thing to do. But we evaluated the applications against published criteria. They're all on the website, and we offered a particular way so that people could look at deciding whether they had evidence or not, or what level of evidence, etc. So they have all been supported financially and non-financially to develop plans, which are now, again, published on the website. They've all been submitted. And we are moving towards a final event for this first phase on the 13th of December. So anybody who's interested can just get on the mailing list there, and we're very happy to have you. It's just a 2-hour event. We're doing it in person in Brussels, but webinar. We are designing the second phase. So in terms of how would you get involved, a decision hasn't been made yet about whether a specific second phase of this Social Catalyst Fund will be established, or whether the learning from this fund will influence other European funding that has been established. We haven't quite worked that out. We've been working closely with the Commission, sharing all the lessons that we have learned along the way. I suppose our big messages really are from the consortium of foundations involved. There are two big gaps. One is funding. People need resources to scale. Whatever route they take, they need money. And the second is they need support. Capacity needs to be built. So organizations like Spring Impact and all of those other really good groups that can get in there and hold hands and work out stuff with people on a step-by-step basis, that's absolutely critical, because a lot of people who are really involved in innovation, they're so delighted with what they've done, they think it will sell itself. And we know that actually the better the idea is, the more resistance there will be from those with a vested interest in not changing things. So a lot of help is needed. So they're the two big gaps. So from a foundation point of view, Compagnia di San Paolo in Italy have already joined. So if there are foundations listening to this, certainly interested in talking to them if they would like to get involved in the thinking through of a potential second phase. But in terms of applications for innovation, such as Social Bite or others, that's closed at the moment. Sorry to be so long-winded.
Yeah. Maybe you're opening again, because apparently, I mean, if you say you had, 150 applications, I mean, this is amazing, that there's so many organizations who actually want to scale across Europe. And I would be super interested. So, I mean, we are one of the people, also one of the organizations who are helping organizations to scale. Yeah. We obviously do that on a German level. And Spring Impact is doing, you said Europe-wide as well, but I think your organizations are mainly based in the UK. So for me, Madeleine, I would be super interested to hear, are there any challenges to scale on a European level? Because I mean, obviously, the circumstances and the laws and the mindset and all of this is different in different European countries. So I could imagine that there are some challenges maybe that are different from when I scale on a national level. So maybe, I don't know if there are already experiences that you can share with the 7 organizations that you have chosen. That might be quite interesting, especially for those who are thinking about going into different European countries.
Sure. No challenges at all. It's all easy. No, of course there are challenges. So no matter how well something has worked in a particular location, the cultural and operational environments in every country are different. And not only that, within countries. So for example, looking at scaling a very good cost-effective initiative supporting elderly, frail people at home that has been done in 9 cities in Italy, and now moving with the help of this Catalyst Fund to Antwerp in Belgium and to Prague. And within Antwerp, then you have within that city of Antwerp different regions with different personalities and different, So for sure, one of the challenges is spending the time to really understand what's happening in the location in which you're trying to scale, and making sure that you adapt what you're doing to fit that environment. Now, I know lots of people say that, but the challenge here is you really have to know what are the essential ingredients of the innovation that make it successful. Because if you bring it somewhere and you find, for example, that there is a request to modify it in some way, and you haven't got the confidence that if you make that change, you will deliver the same outcomes. So in the city of Antwerp, it might be that there's a political commitment to offer something to everybody over 75. This was an initiative designed for over 80s. Will you make that kind of change? So some of these innovations that are around, they know exactly what the critical ingredients are. So in your area, Martina, Housing First will know what are the critical ingredients in the Housing First approach that make it replicable in terms of outcomes, more or less. Individual placement and support and mental health employment, again, they will have all of that worked out and a way of testing fidelity to the model. But the challenge is in innovations is to know, on the one hand, what's critical not to compromise on, and then being open to both learning about what's happening in the location you're bringing it to, and having the kind of humility and modesty to understand that there's already a big response to whatever social challenge you're involved in, and learning about that and trying to find out whether what you're actually bringing is better. More cost effective. It's not just needs to be better, it needs to represent a very good use of resources. And then you get into the real challenge, which is about how do you get people to move resources away from the existing response into your new wonderful innovation. So as they say in English, you cannot make the omelette without breaking the eggs, but you need very much to do this on a small way, then getting some success and winning hearts and minds, etc., etc. So lots of challenges, but I think modesty and humility rather than going in there with a big pitch because your idea is great. Having a great idea is maybe 1% of the work, I think.
Thank you. That is such good advice, which I think is also applicable for any country, whether you scale to different countries or whether you stay in your own country. So thank you so much for this. I'd like to ask a question to Hannah as well, but maybe before this, so we have less than 10 minutes. If you have any questions, so the participants, write them in the chat. I will see them. You can also write them in German and I will translate them. So take that, opportunity if you want and ask a question. But until then, I would like Hannah to ask you something. So. But Len was telling a lot about how they also work with, or Genia also work with, governments and also on EU level with the Commission, and obviously on a funding, because this is one of the gaps you identified, and as well as the skills. And Hannah, we talked about the skills that you, with Spring Impact, already kind of equip organizations with, but you actually also work with on the funding level, you partner with funders who support them. Did I read this right? And if so, how do you do this? How do you approach them? And how do you kind of, I don't want to say convince, because hopefully you don't have to convince them. Hopefully they come to you. But how do you do that? How in supporting nonprofits who are scaling?
Yeah, great question. I think, so I guess there's I didn't say this at the beginning, but there is kind of two main strands to our work. One being supporting proven innovations and organizations or nonprofits, and the other being working with funders. So yeah, you definitely got that right. I think we have had funders coming to us and saying, we want to help our grantees who've got something that really works, to help them to think about how to scale that, and also often to help them to think about how to make that sustainable in the long term. So we're working with Sport England, a big UK-based funder or English funder, and Oak Foundation, for example, and the National Lottery. So a few kind of big funders that have specifically said they want to support their grantees in that way. I think convincing funders of the value of, capacity building support, like Madeleine was talking about, and of investing in organizations when they don't know exactly what the outcomes are going to be is quite hard. Because I think a lot of UK funders are still quite driven by kind of understanding metrics and quite short-term funding, project-specific funding, even though that is kind of gradually changing. So I think the funders that we've been able to work with and support the grantees of are quite forward-thinking in relation to other funders in the UK. And I think it's just about finding the individuals within those foundations that are kind of really driven by thinking differently and really supporting organizations in a holistic way. I think for us, in terms of convincing funders of the value, I would say that talking about like sustainability and cost effectiveness and supporting organizations to kind of think about scale and partnering in a way that enables kind of more sustainability, because you're working with more different organizations being able to tap into different funding sources. That's one way I think of supporting funders to see the value. But I think it is a journey.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that insight. So we are nearly at the end. I did have many more questions because I find that super interesting to talk to you and just hear what's happening on the European level, and I hope that we can also continue that conversation. But I would like to end this panel with a question to all three of you, and it is like, if you were to choose, or if you would, if you could tell us, like, what else do you think needs to change, either on the national level or maybe also on EU level, so that organizations that do want to scale and that can scale and that have the impact and that should be everywhere or should scale, can be supported in the way that they need to. So, what's the next steps, or what would you maybe like wish for it to happen? I don't know who wants to start. Maybe we start with a practitioner. Again, what you as an organization, would you like, or what needs to change?
So I think, following on what Madeleine and Hannah were saying, it is accessibility to the funding. Mm-hmm. So then the support can be provided and can be used by organizations, because very often, as we've already heard, it is not about growing the team, but it is about assisting and teaching the existing team how to make the impact bigger, mm-hmm. With the resources that we've got. So I think from my perspective, it would be discussion around how funding is made accessible for the organizations that then can support and work with either charities, social enterprises, or whoever is interested in scaling up the impact.
Yeah, thank you. Hannah, what do you think should change on the national or maybe also the EU level?
I mean, I was going to say the same. Like, I definitely think that funding, and like particularly unrestricted funding for organizations to try things out, take risks, is absolutely critical, and is not kind of there in to the extent that it would ideally be at the moment. I think something else that makes things difficult is the kind of like quite competitive culture often between organizations in terms of competing for funding, even if they're really natural partners. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know quite exactly what would need to change that, because it's such a big kind of systems level issue. But I think that kind of collaboration between funders to think about how to create an environment where proper partnerships are rewarded is something else that's really important.
Yeah, totally. Thank you so much for saying this. Madeleine, the same question to you. Maybe you can also look at the EU level, because you are obviously also involved in the EU level, not only with the European.
Yeah, well, indeed, Spring Impact are international as well, so you have that view. Yeah, look, I think thinking nationally first, I think, and I would say this about any region, Europe or any region, I think what we need is some more coherent strategy around developing innovations that can really help us solve the problems that we face in society. So I just worry a little bit at the moment that some of what's happening is a little bit on the margins, nice to have, but quite limited in numbers that can be reached. And then if it's successful, it has to find some way of fighting its way into the system and gaining some traction and credibility. So I would favour the idea of a national strategy, so that resources that are being put in at European or indeed national level would be would have clear objectives about resourcing every stage of development, not just the creation of ideas and growth, but the scaling, and that there would be clear dedicated funding for that. So I would hope that if my idea was adopted, that it would have concrete expression at the ground level for an organisation like Social Bite. So I think coherence, and I think in the context of national and international objectives. And we don't even have to fight about those. We all know what the SDGs are. We all know what the European Pillar of Social Rights stuff is. We all are in countries with wonderful national objectives, which are often aspirational. So no problem finding commonly agreed objectives within which to house the development of innovations that should be supported to scale where they are successful. So yeah, I'd like to see it coming in more mainstream and being valued where appropriate. I mean, there's not everything that happens in the space is worthy of support, but there's sure a lot of stuff that could be really helpful to people if more people could get access to it.
Thank you so much for this, and thank you again, Madeleine, Hannah, and Masena, for being with us and being here during your lunch break, because you're an hour before us. Thank you so much. I thought it was so interesting. Although I love talking about the international scene and scaling up, I hope that the participants also learn something, because I think it's so important to also keep that exchange going. And yes, thank you so much again. And I hope maybe you will have time to join other panels in the festival, even though it is in German, but I think some of you at least understand a little bit. But if not, I wish you a very, very good day. Thursday it is, rest of the day. And yeah, thank you for everyone who joined for this international panel, which is also a first in our festival. Thank you.